This stunning piece of concept art is from Daniel J. Burns, one of 4 images from his website listed under the working title of Alien Paradise Lost, a script which would evolve and eventually become Alien Covenant. The initial premise for a follow-up, according to Scott, would focus on Shaw and David as they head off to the engineer homeworld. Like Prometheus, there would be no xenomorphs, with Ridley making a decision to explore new variants of the alien. However, rumors would spread that the studio didn't like the direction that Prometheus was taking the franchise, and that now they wanted its sequel to be more alien-focused. Fans have speculated that this took place when the drafts began using the alien prefix in the name, but from what I can piece together, it seems like this change took place while Alien Paradise Lost was already its working title. Not much is known about the earlier work on the film, as none of these early scripts have made their way online. But we can see some of the new concepts that are missing from Alien Covenant in the art of Daniel J. Burns, Khang Le, and Carlos Huante. The title Paradise Lost is of course referring to Paradise Lost, an epic poem written by John Milton in the 1600s that tells the biblical story of Satan's banishment to hell, which is then followed by his journey to paradise to corrupt mankind through Adam and Eve to spite his creator. In Scott's vision of the Alien franchise, David is Satan, telling Walter that it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven, where he's killed off the engineer gods and turned their world into his own hell, and now he wants to unleash his own creation to corrupt all of mankind. This is all there in Alien Covenant, but the earlier concept art, at least in my mind, show us some of the early world that was more of a Prometheus-influenced sequel instead of the alien-leaning prequel that Covenant was. The first writer for what would become Alien Covenant was Jack Paglin, announced on June 17, 2013, where it was simply called Prometheus 2. Then on March 24th of 2014, Michael Green would take over writing duties. The only thing I could find on their scripts is that the wrap noted with Michael Green's hiring that the story would be more alien-y, with the terrifying tone of past films, something Scott mentioned a lot during production. However, Ridley would also say in 2014 that he's had 15 drafts evolving, and that the beast is done, that they need something new, and he thinks he's found the next step, and that the engineers were a good start. By 2015, Scott was still hoping to do 3 more films in a Prometheus franchise, which would go even further in proving his intention to bury the Xeno and go on to new creations. Khang Le would provide concept images in 2014, and much of it would center around an engineer world like Planet 4, but drawn in homage to H.R. Giger's biomechanical art style. The main theme is the same as Covenant, with David attacking the engineers with their own pathogen, but with differing results. We see David arms outstretched as engineers break and burst open around it, similar to the carnage seen on Planet 4. But we also see a humanoid who could be an engineer in the anathema stage of exposure. It's titled Brain Bursters, and its head is ripped open by what looks like a kind of burster with fingers around its mouth like a facehugger. Creatures who may be related to these guys labeled as Egg and Pregnant on Lee's site and Parasite on AVP Galaxy. I also get the feeling that the engineers were testing the pathogen out on themselves, as we have images showing the progression of what is labeled as a disease, showing them with signs of pathogen ingestion like the last engineer, leading to a transformation into something more alien, with an elongated head called the Reconstruct. But I don't think this was the final stage, as we have this pale alien deacon-like creature also labeled as disease, with many more images of what looks to be variations on the same engineers turning alien, and they are all labeled xenomorph, with one of the images actually beginning to get close to a true xeno. There are 2 images of neomorph heads that look very similar to the pale xenomorphs, and then there's this, titled Sick Engineers, with an amazing view of an infected engineer, whose head is swollen and elongated in what looks painful as hell, as robed authorities, presumably priests or some form of leadership, medical, or science-minded engineers oversee things from afar. In what could be from testing or by David's attack, we're shown an engineer with black worm-like creatures coming out of him, as he looks to be breaking down, with the curious title of Xenomorph, so this could be the beginning of the transformation into what we see here. The following concepts are called the Egg Room, and look to be the early stages of David's lab on P4. We see David tending the growth before him, though it's not apparent here just what is in the eggs and whose work this is, his or the engineers. Here labeled as egg table are a group of eggs connected by vine or root-like structures that are growing on a grid-like frame. Beneath it there's some green unknown plant life, white worms that could be brain bursters, and ivory tendrils similar to the ones beneath the ovomorphs. They are near round in shape, fairly translucent and have a red growth at the bottom, which is holding what appears to be a small worm-like creature, possibly the parasite. In the image titled Egg Farming, we see David holding one of the round eggs, while behind him in the circular racks are a group of eggs that are more oval in shape and appear to have something more alien in them. For an even closer look, we can see 3 variations of the eggs. The first looking like the one growing on the grid, and now that it's easier to see, what looked like a worm from afar looks like its belly, a feeding tube, or some other organ attached to a brown creature with a tail and head like the parasite. The second one looks like what was on the circular racks, with a brown alien inside with an elongated head, a tail, 2 arms, and 2 legs. The third one is possibly a mutation or failed egg. There's a large dark-colored object growing off the back of what I think is its head, and the egg is misshapen, perhaps containing a twin. The early scripts didn't hide the intention of David as the creator of the xenomorph, and the alien in the second egg may just be an early xeno or relative of them. If it is alien, then it's possible that the first eggs harbor parasites that inject their hosts with a version of the pathogen, a variant on the facehuggers, while the second one grows an imp or young alien like what we saw in Covenant. In the film, David would need Shaw's remains to create his Praetomorph, and he has access to humans here as well, behind the egg table on the wall in large sacks that resemble the eggs, and look very similar to ovomorphine from the Alien director's cut. And here again, labeled as cocoon people, where the bodies have been placed into the wall with black webbing, much like the Xenos do with their hosts. The one in the middle has some growth or hugger type alien attached to his face, while the one on the right appears to have a burster's exit wound in her stomach. Carlos Huante, a concept artist for Prometheus, would return for its intended sequel in 2014, with works bearing the title of Prometheus 2 and once more in 2015 under the working title of Paradise. The gallery from 2014 was wildly different than anything else seen, full of images of alien plant life with subtle xeno influences, and then we have a dog that David would have called Bud, who would greet the crew when they arrived, and his minks, an army of little terrors with alien-like mouths that were likely created with the pathogen. When he resumed work a year later, he'd make a series of storyboards with explorers examining various plants, like the ones from earlier. In one set, Ledward could be seen taking a closer look at a flower that would then open up and release a pollen in his face that would immediately begin to change him. He quickly bloats up into something like an alien and then falls back onto the ground, where he then becomes a kind of alien fungus, now part of the surroundings, with xeno-like protrusions where limbs once were. An image eerily similar to this version of Khang Le's egg table. In another version of Ledward's infection, he finds a flower in a cave of tall grasses, and when he opens it up, a rainbow of pollen emerges in a beautiful display, surrounding the two in brilliant lights. But up close, we see what's really in the air, small insect-like creatures that are drilling into their skin. Some would get the head in far enough that it would break off and go into their bloodstream. And the more that would make it in, the more exaggerated the results would be, with Carlos explaining that the fungus like Ledward would have received a high dose, hence the quick and drastic transformation. Another set of boards shows Hallett, who would be infected from spores in Covenant, but here, instead of the puffball-looking structures, he finds a small group of eggplant-like objects that, when approached, would stand up, while an ovipositor or stinger springs from the top of it, striking him in the face and implanting him with the creation of David's. He continues on for a few hours until his head begins to swell and eventually bursts open, giving us a neomorph. And here is his idea for the neomorph backburster scene, where upon its exit from Ledward's back, it mimics the dorsal tubes of the aliens before awakening and falling over. We've also seen concept art from Carlos with the Paradise title showcasing the Deacon, a creation of his, though it's not what we eventually saw in Prometheus. Here, the Deacon's host is human, and it's the initial step towards the xenomorph. A pale white, almost entirely organic alien of clean design, still very close to being human. The second and third images are progressions of the creature where they are gradually gaining the mechanical nature. He would also create many versions of the neomorphs based on the goblin shark that Ridley loved as an inspiration. His younger versions look a lot like the final film iterations, whereas his vision for the Deacon seems to have been repurposed and used for the neomorph adults. And now we get to the recently revealed works by Daniel J. Burns, created in 2015 under the title of Paradise Lost, though I can't help but wonder if it's from one of the earlier versions that use that title. I say that because a draft of Paradise Lost and an early draft of Covenant are both available online and confirmed to be real, and they are both very close to the film, with only a few differences. But the art here looks more in line with Khang Le's and Carlos Huante's work that isn't portrayed in Alien Covenant. The first image has a hidden title, which under a contrast and brightness change reveals the name Xenomorph Deacon Hybrid, and you can tell that the Deacon lineage in it is based on Huante's Deacon with the more pointy headpiece. The blue Deacon is based in concept somewhat on Huante's Ultramorph, an alien born from an engineer, which is why it's so large, and this is likely an adult, as it's nearly as large as the massive room of what appears to be an engineer juggernaut, and it's not even fully standing up. There is a reflective liquid on the floor which could be the pathogen, while the alien itself is also transparent or glassy looking with a highly reflective quality. With Ridley's intention to make the Deacon a proto-xenomorph, this is likely the evolution of the alien getting closer to the Xeno from 1979's Alien. The next image shows us a large cavernous area with stone pillars reaching from the floor to the ceiling in a tree-like pattern, with a green light glow that's emphasized in all of the shots showing engineer technology. I actually think that this might be part of the engineer's terraforming equipment, which in concept art used or was powered by large green crystals, like the small one seen in the headroom. The design of the area also looks similar to the area seen here beneath the engineered temple that supplies oxygen to its environment. The third image shows what I think is the inside of an engineered building. There's someone walking through in a Prometheus-era suit that could be Elizabeth Shaw. The surroundings are really lit in that green light, and there's a rippling water-like substance on the ceiling. It really is too bad that they took the Giger aesthetic out of Planet 4. These images are really beautiful, and closer to the story that fans like myself wanted, but I could also see where budget constraints may have forced the shift to the Roman look that we eventually got. And then we have this shot of a Prometheus-like ship sitting on the surface of what looks a lot like LV-426, with its jagged and strange-shaped rock features, though here it looks like a drier environment with a natural Earth-like brown coloring versus the blue Cameron tint that we know of on Acheron. In September of 2015, Ridley Scott would officially announce Alien Paradise Lost as the name for the sequel to Prometheus, and when asked why this title was chosen, he said, "Well, because we're heading back to why and how and when the beast was invented. We'll go back into the back door of the very first Alien I did 30 years ago," with this statement signifying the change in direction with a new focus on the xenomorphs. 2 months later, the name was changed once more to Alien Covenant. Without any early scripts to read and just by examining the concept art shown here by all three artists, it doesn't appear to me that the core idea of Prometheus 2, David's destruction of the engineers and his work on the alien, changed a whole lot on their way to Alien Covenant. It looks like it was always Ridley's intention to have David arrive at the engineer planet, where he would then kill them with their own pathogen, and from there he'd build a lab and begin work on his own take on the perfect organism. With that said, I really wish they would have had the Giger-inspired homeworld that lines up with the rest of the biomechanical tech. It would have separated them from mankind, and I think it would have added a sense of mystery, a feeling of something alien that the Roman-styled city just could not achieve. I also would have loved to have seen the various alien hybrids that could have fallen into the lineage of the xenomorphs. The scripts leading up to Covenant were more upfront in stating that David was the creator of the xenomorph, whereas the film gave that impression, but didn't come right out and state it, perhaps leaving the door open for the next installment and one more hybrid in between the Praetomorph and Big Chap. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.